For a while I've wanted to do a video around wild camping for beginners, but aware that obviously the experiences and perhaps fears of women can be quite different from those men have, I thought I'd enlist a friend of mine to talk about it with me in this interview. So we get into many aspects of it. We've wild camped together quite a bit, but she's also wild camped solo quite a bit.
All these, I definitely found I had to undo a lot of you shouldn't do that narratives. I was like, but I mean, I'm one person,
you
know, with a little tent, and especially if I'm on my own, I kind of like there to be somebody nearish by, which is often useful for.
So I decided to do an interview with my friend Mary here about wild camping. Now, she's not a cyclist.
Also, I was thinking, because with the wild camping interview, I say at the start you're not a cyclist, so I can then cut this in and you'll be like, oh, or is she?
Doing it that way, but we have, I think, wild camped in 9 different locations around Ireland. Actually 10 if you include Giles's Quay going back. Mostly around Kerry, but also Sligo,
Wexford,
Louth, and actually is Mullaghmore, Donegal or Sligo? It's Sligo, isn't it?
Donegal.
Yeah.
Is it? No, it's Sligo.
It's Sligo. Okay,
yeah.
So they're the different ones.
Yeah.
And specifically, I was saying the idea with this is for people who maybe haven't done much wild camping and would have thoughts in their head about it that might put them off, and how we found things. So what's the first time you've ever wild camped? Was it actually in Ireland or elsewhere?
Wild camping. It would have been in Ireland. Like I would have camped in wild campsites, in different, like in Botswana or Zambia, but they were still set up, but they weren't necessarily fenced in or enclosed. So yeah, probably. Like with many people, probably like COVID and the lockdown is when I first started thinking about it. And a lot of it was also wanting to camp, but finding campsites very bad value, and not really set up for somebody on their own with a tent. They might be okay, they might be good for families or people in camper vans, and some campsites don't want you as a single camper. So I think I would have, like in 2020... or 2020, I can't remember when it was, done a bit of camping, say in hostel grounds or something, but I always found it quite restricted in that I wanted to wake up with a view, and in lots of campsites in Ireland you're not really doing that, and also the budgetary side of it as well was a consideration. So yeah, I'd say 2020, so it was reasonably recent to wild camping, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think actually one of the things I found different about Scotland, and actually why I ended up using campsites more than I expected, is they've much more availability at reasonable rates for kind of single campers. So like there were loads of places, well not loads, sorry, the cheapest ones were £5, there were a couple of them, and then most were kind of 10 to 12.
Yeah.
Including some amazing places in Orkney, like there's a I think it's a council-run campsite it's outside Kirkwell, where the facilities have underfloor heating.
Oh God, yeah. No, I mean there'd be campsites here where it's like, because it's a lot of the time per tent. So if you're a single camper, and you might be paying like €25, and that mightn't even include showers, you might be paying extra for your showers. So it's just not great value. And also, if it's you and then a load of people in big family tents or a load of camper vans, it's just not. It's not really what I want to get out of camping. Yeah, because there's the side of it where it's like it's great fun. Being outside and setting up your gear and all the rest of it. But the other side of it is being actually out in nature and waking up with a view and going to sleep with sound of the sea or whatever it is. And you don't really always get that. Well, I think campsites serve a really important purpose, for for people with families or for older people who need to have facilities, or just for people who prefer that type of camping, or that like security or predictability of a campsite. But I find a lot of them in Ireland are more and more are moving towards it's camper vans and caravans, or big family camping. So even if, like, I've had places where I'd inquire as a single person and they're like, this is a family run campsite, so I think they think I'm going to be like, I don't know, partying or noisy or something, do you know. And it's frustrating because sometimes, like, you know, I might get chatting to people who are cycling and camping, and all they kind of want is, like, they don't want much. They just want to be able to, like, pitch up for a night, maybe use the kitchen, maybe have a shower, and then to be packed up and gone at like 6 or 7 the next morning. So, you know, they don't want much, but like, it's just not really set up to support that kind of functional kind of services that you've talked about loads of the sites in Scotland have, you know, because and again, if you're on a budget, you're not going to be like, okay, yeah, drop 25 quid on that every couple of nights, you know.
Yeah, because I mean, I think part of the thing with doing kind of cycle touring is a lot of people do quite long trips.
Yeah.
So they're maybe out for 4 weeks or whatever. So if you're spending even 100 quid every night for 4 weeks, that's, you know, vast amounts of money, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
There was something when you were talking about facilities wise. I mean, basically what you want is a shower would be nice, and somewhere to charge your devices, charge your phone or whatever is about it. And the kitchen's a nice bonus, but even that is
that's true. It's not even necessary it's not even necessary to have a kitchen. It's nice to have somewhere where you can get hot water, maybe, like or fill up your water bottle, but you don't need a fully kitted out kitchen either.
And the other challenge actually with official campsites, for lack of a better term, is a lot of them have curfews, so you have to arrive by a certain time, which really doesn't work if you're cycling, because one, you often don't know when you actually will arrive, and secondly, there's lots of, like, actually the most pleasant cycling time in say June is well into the evening in the summer. That's really nice. There's not much traffic on the roads, you know, so you kind of want to be able to push it out to maybe 10 o'clock at night. So that's an option. And then lots of places don't want necessarily to do single nights. They're looking for people doing a minimum 2 or minimum 3 or whatever else.
Which is a bit of work if you're doing any sort of touring.
Yeah,
and I've only done like car camping, which I know is different because you don't have the same considerations around packing, but you're still you're still on a route. Like, you're still thinking, like, I want to finish the day there, so I want to camp in or around there somewhere, you know. So like, and if you're coming off like some camping trips I did, I'd be like hiking during the day, which can be very long days. So yeah, you might think, oh, I'll be done by 7:30, but you mightn't actually be ready until 9, or, you know, whatever if you're driving long distances. So yeah, it's better to have, and that's the other thing about wild camping, it just does give you much more freedom, and you can be a bit more spontaneous. Of like, if you see a spot that looks good, you could be like, oh, maybe I'll, you know, even if you're not like pitching up right then and there, if it's early in the afternoon, but you could be like, oh, maybe I'll swing back around and camp there tonight, even if you've had somewhere else in mind. Like, if you see a nice spot, it does give you a bit more freedom, definitely.
The one other thing I was going to say, yes, you mentioned like the ability to camp so when you wake up and there's a beautiful view, you're at cliff top or beach or something else as being an important thing. And I was just thinking that's true, that's really nice, and that's partially how I select things with the cycling. Sometimes you're just going, this is as far as I can get today. I think I could throw myself up anywhere. And it reminded me of when we were looking for a spot down in Wexford, and we were checking the end down the Warren, and I was kind of like, oh, we could probably set up the tents in that bunch of trees behind his shed over there. But you were like, no, only because somewhere pretty.
I want a view.
So we went 40 kilometres back up the coast and found somewhere that was nice. Yeah, that's I think one of the challenges with cycling is if you get to a spot and it's not suitable, then you can be a bit stuck.
And the maps can be tricky, because somewhere might look fine on the map, so you can be like, oh, I see a bit of grass, and then you get there and the grass is actually at a really steep angle. There are those kind of, and I think that's a frustration with, like, you know, I've camped at like some of the spots in Kerry you would have camped at, like, you know, 2 years in a row, because you know it's good, and you know it's like you get the nice view, but also maybe it's close to a town, or maybe they've got toilets, or maybe, you know, whatever, you kind of figure out that it suits you, and then like, or like say one example is like Hookhead, where I camped a couple of times, I think at least 2 years, and now that's not a thing that people can do. It seems it's kind of hard to figure out.
Well, they're trying to stop people. I don't know how much they're actually enforcing.
Yeah,
that,
but it definitely, because like the years I was there, of course, there was like no camping signs everywhere, but it was very much. I mean, certainly the first year I went, which I think was 2021. I mean, it was the August bank holiday. It was busy, it was really busy, but it was fine. There was plenty of space, and I didn't see anyone. I mean, maybe the bins were a bit of an issue because it's not. They were just like maybe set up for people visiting the lighthouse for the day, not really set up for campers. But that's very easily addressed, you know. So I think that's a shame that when those kind of places that do tick lots of boxes for people are like then become inaccessible, and again, like you were saying, we're not sure how much that's being enforced. But I think a lot of the wild camping spots it is kind of word of mouth, or somewhere that you've gone once and then you'll go back to a couple of years later, or someone like Wine Strand was somebody. I think I put a question on Instagram and somebody said, "Oh, my brother camped at Wine Strand." A couple of people around, but it won't be too busy. And you know, that was a lovely spot, like, you know. So I think it's a lot of it gets around like that. But then if you rock up somewhere and it's like, oh, they've actually really clamped down on this now, then you could find yourself stuck. Which again, I think, like you've made the point a few times with cycling, you're probably setting up quite late in the day and you're on the road quite early, so you can maybe get away with it and not be that noticeable. You can't really do that with a car. Like you tend to be quite noticeable in a car.
Yeah, I mean, the only time I've ever been moved on was that time with you at Place in Kerry, which is also an OPW site, which means I think they empty the bins at 8:30 in the morning. And the particular night as well, it probably wasn't helped by the fact that some other people had set a tent up right on top of a sand dune in full view of the official attraction.
And it was the August bank holiday. So it was busy. But we can't have been visible where we were. Like,
not particularly. Because I've been there before, and I have seen the top of the litter emptying truck drive by and there's activity earlier than, because I always kind of assume 9's at the time you need to get out, but that we got visited at about 8:45. But you were already kind of making breakfast and packing up. So it was grand.
Starting to think about it. And they moved because there was a family, or do you remember?
There was the guy and his son, I think.
Over the way, I think they'd been fishing or something, and they were frantically packing up as well. So which is, you know, it's, on the one hand you're like, okay, it is an OPW site and they're OPW staff, but it's still a shame because none of us we're all going to be packed up and gone within the hour. I think, you know, and nobody had been. It had been very quiet, you know. So I know there's houses around there and all the rest of it, but I'm like, there's no way anyone could have. It was definitely not interfering with anyone.
But I mean, it's also a good example of, in terms of fears you might have, one of them is that somebody's going to arrive and tell you you're not allowed camp there. And in which case, actually, that's not that big a deal. You just go, all right, I'll be gone in about half an hour.
I mean, because they were only like, I mean, that was one of the ones that we had my dog with us, and she was like, not tied up, it sounds very dramatic, her lead was wrapped around a stake just so we could keep an eye on her, and you know, they were a bit like, oh, keep your dog under control. So if you had like a dog off the lead, which I don't think you're meant to do in Derrynane, I'm not sure what, you know, the way some beaches have like dogs are meant to be on the lead or not, potentially they could maybe fine you for that. But yeah, I mean, or they were just like pack up and leave, and I don't know, I mean, would it, like, I think that the thing that, like, the first few wild camps I did, which were on my own, the first few wild camps I did were in a group, but the first few I did on my own, one of the things I was worried about was being moved on at night. So being moved on at like 10:30, and then being like, well, then I'm gonna have to go and find another spot at 10:30, you know. And often at that point I might have had a few cans of beer, you know, so I was worried about that. Or irate local who doesn't like people camping.
Yes.
You're right. Now, as it happens, the experience was totally the opposite, and lots of people just being very curious, very friendly, or, you know, that didn't happen at all. I would imagine there are some places where maybe it might happen, but also I was like, but I mean, I'm one person,
yeah.
you know, with a little tent, and you know, not a group of people lighting a big fire in some place where you shouldn't be lighting a fire, you know. So but that was one of the things I was really worried about. It's like, yeah, what if I get moved on, and what if somebody who's really pissed off about wild campers lands in on me at 10:30 or 11?
Yeah.
In the morning less so, because I was like, I just leave, because I'd be packing up to go anyway. And that, I think that was something where I was like, how everywhere has a no camping sign.
Yes.
Pretty much everywhere I've ever camped has had a no camping sign.
Yeah.
How serious are they about that no camping sign? You know, like, is it just it's just been there for donkey's years, or is it something that is actively enforced? And you can never tell.
Yeah.
You know, and like, it is a useful measure, I think, sometimes to be like, okay, there was a couple of vans parked nearby, for example, especially if I'm on my own. I kind of like there to be somebody nearish by, which is often useful for if there's a van, or if there's signs that somebody has recently camped there. Usually it's with a campfire, an old campfire is what you'll see, and if it's reasonably fresh, you can generally tell that, and you're like, okay, so people do and have camped here. The downside of that is the place we camped in Louth in Templetown, where there was loads of rubbish. People had just left, like.
I did about 2 or 3 trips to the bin. I mean, you have to think about that rubbish. There was a bin 100 metres away in the car park.
That's the thing with that side. It was like there was bins, 24-hour toilets. And that was like, okay, that is just really annoying, because just, you know, that annoyed me. Because it's like you just tidy up after yourself. But I mean, yeah, so that's a bad sign of when people have camped there. But generally being like, okay, this is a spot where people camp. That's always kind of a useful marker for me of being like, okay, this is probably grand to set up here, you know. But if the signs of there haven't been a big massive party like the week before, maybe not.
Yeah, it's quite funny. You end up with kind of well, I want this but not that, and not too much of that other than kind of.
And I had this, like, again, one of the first times I camped on my own, where I had it in my head that I wanted other people around. But then I was like, but I only want like a couple in a van, you know, a couple 100 metres away, or another woman on her own. I was like, I don't want a group of lads camping beside me. But again, I was like, well, if a group of lads rock up and camp beside me, they're as entitled to do that as I am. So would I really feel more comfortable with that, or would I feel more comfortable on my own? Do you know? And like, the answer in that case is I feel more comfortable on my own most of the time. Once you get used to the idea, once you overcome the barrier of being like, oh, I'm here on my own. And I mean, the places I'm wild camping, it's not like, I'm not trekking up a mountain and camping on the side of a mountain yet, maybe someday. So it's all places that are like a 10-minute drive from a town, you know, a couple of minutes away from a house, most likely, you know. So it's all it's the things that you get into your head. But I definitely had this, like, I think the first night I camped on my own was at Ross Bay in Kerry, and there was a van. If I came out of where I parked my tent and walked up towards the sea, just to the right there was a couple in a camper van, and like, they waved at me and I waved at them, and I was like, lovely, that's perfect. And then the next night at Bannistrand, I was in the dunes and there was a van in the car park, but they left at about 10:30. And I was like, oh, okay, no, I'm here on my own now. And how do I feel about that? Because they were just a bit of a security blanket, having the van in the car park. And I was like, but does it really make that much of a difference? You know, and I was like, anyway, all right, I'm here now, so I'm not moving, so, you know, have to just get over it. And again, Banna is like, there's houses around Banna. It's not that isolated, but it is funny, I think, particularly as a woman, the things that you get into your head, that you'll convince yourself that's not a good idea, or I shouldn't do that, or it's, you know. But that was like, well, again, would I feel more comfortable if a guy or a couple of guys rocked up and were camping around the corner from me? Maybe. Like, maybe not, you know. It's like, but because it's all the same concerns you have existing in society, and then it just transplants over to to something that you're told is dangerous, you know, and that you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
But when you actually break down why those things are, it's like, oh, well, actually, it's just the same as anything else.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah.
Yeah, only that, it's got the general thing of, I mean, it's not, like, there's nothing's completely safe, so it's kind of like, well, how do you balance having the freedom to do things
Yeah.
against what the actual, you know, risk is? And I mean, you know, I wouldn't dream of camping in a city, for instance, for that reason.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, the thing of, like, going off and camping halfway up a mountain or go camping somewhere really remote, like, you're not going to come across anyone else you're going to come across is just doing the same thing as you.
Yeah.
And I guess the risks there is more like if you hurt yourself or you get sick or something like that. But I mean, again, that's a thing that can happen anywhere. You know, it's not your chances don't necessarily increase when you're camping, but it's all these. I definitely found I had to undo a lot of you shouldn't do that narratives. And then around the but there's a no camping sign, so that means I shouldn't camp. And it's like, well, then I literally can't camp anywhere. You know. I think the only place where I was like, okay, they're serious about this no camping was around the Maharees in Kerry.
Oh, right, yes.
Because it's a protected nature reserve. And I was like, okay, that's pretty clear. And there was huge campsites. Castle Gregory, that's the town. Really, really big campsites. So I was like, okay, you would definitely be moved on quite quickly if you were showing any signs of setting up here. Which it's fair enough, like, because that is a protected area and all that. But I mean,
Dogs Bay in Connemara is also well known for people being moved on, and it's a somewhat similar logic of it does have an erosion problem, and I think there's the problem with it is, like, in terms of campers causing that, it's not like a cyclist or a hiker or something. It's a gang of teenagers having a party and having a fire and stuff. Or if you had huge amounts of hikers or cyclists, it could be an issue. So sometimes I think that there's a little precious bit to that. I think that Castle Gregory bit is a bit posh as well, basically.
I think it is quite. But there was something, so I went down a rabbit hole reading about it. There is something to do with the dunes and the
Mahagrass
ecosystem. Ecosystem and the dunes, which camping would disturb. So I'm like, that's grand and fair enough. But you remember that the second place we camped in Sligo in
the car park?
Yeah, in the weird in Mullaghmore.
Mullaghmore, yeah.
So it was this weird sort of a field, sort of a car park that there was, I don't know, maybe like 5 tents, 6 tents, but it was obviously a well-known spot where people just went and then you could walk down to.
I mean, I think that was effectively probably a council-owned car park above the beach for parking, and there were a couple of people camping with quite big tents, a couple of family groups.
And then there was a few. There was people with camper vans parked on the road, and then their pals were camping, had tents inside. So it's those kind of things. I'm like, that's a grand. That doesn't. Like, well,
that's Giles Quay is similar.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It's traditional that people go there and camp, and there's always people camping in those particular spots. And I know at Giles Quay, I think it may be because that bit of land that people camp on beside the quay is. It formed when the harbour wall was built, so it's a bit like
right.
That's my suspicion.
So it doesn't really belong to anyone.
Yeah, I think so. And there's the railway. That railway isn't used anymore, but as you look down that peninsula, there's a few spots where the railway is pinched off. Actually, Templetown is the same, because that high bank there is the railway as well. We're kind of pinched off such a small parcel of land that nobody's actually.
But that was always
useful. One
of the things that confused me about Hookhead. I'm like, who actually owns this? Bit of land, because the OPW owned the lighthouse. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible they own the rest of the land around. I mean,
or does the council own it?
Yeah. Well, the push against camping there came when the person who ran the lighthouse changed, because
that's right.
The previous, I think we were both women, but the previous one, whenever she was asked about wild camping, thought it was
really supportive
great and added to it and all the rest. And then the new one was just like, no, these people are a complete nuisance. They're looking for water. They want to use the toilets. Blah blah blah.
Yeah. And again, like, to me, I'm like, okay, so that's happening, right? And people would be coming in looking to fill up their water canisters. Then just put up an honesty box.
Yeah.
Or I mean, those kind of tap to pay things that you can get all over the place
Yeah.
now, and just be like, yeah, £2, £3. I mean, sorry, filling up your water canister isn't going to break the bank.
Yeah.
Or using the toilets, you know.
Yeah.
So, but I think most people would, you know, okay, so if it's like 50% of people do it, that would probably cover any
Yeah.
inconvenience that's there, you know. And then there's also the thing of people probably come in and buy something in the cafe, or, you know, or maybe visit the lighthouse, whatever it is. So it's this thing of like, if people are doing it anyway, make it so, like, put in bins so people don't leave rubbish. Now I know there'll always be people who leave rubbish, but generally speaking, if you make things easy for people, rather than just being like, no, it's like the, you know, as we've talked about several times, like toilets being locked at 9:00
Yeah.
and not being open until 9:00 in the morning. It's like, but they're there.
Yeah,
like, just leave them open. What do you think is what's going to happen?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I think one of the interesting things is because a lot of those car parks also have no overnight parking rules, which are presumably to deter people from camper vanning there.
Yeah.
Which is almost the complete opposite of what you actually want. In that it would make more sense to allow people to overnight park, but you don't want people parking there all day, taking up spaces that, you know, people wanting to use the beach might want or whatever. That would be terrible.
And I think, you know, again, if it was like no parking between the hours of blah and blah, sorry, no camper van parking, because if it's like, okay, you're grand from 9 till 9, right, or whatever it is, then like, again, most people would be packed up and gone.
Yeah.
And it, you know, that early morning, it's dog walkers. Like, it's not really people arriving to set up on the beach for. We're talking about beaches, like, to set up
dog
for
walkers
the day.
and swimmers, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So we were kind of coming and going. Because I think the last of the swimmers were gone from Templetown by 10:30.
Yeah.
There's people doing swimming quite late.
Yeah.
So like, it doesn't really make any difference to anyone, you know.
I think it was possibly when you were at Banner then, because a lot of the time when one of us is out camping on our own, we're texting each other. And I remember you texted me going that the van had left.
Oh yeah.
And you were feeling a bit nervous. And then I think a car arrived and you were doing, what the hell, somebody come driving in here at 10 o'clock at night or whatever. And of course then subsequently I was going, this keeps happening. And you realise that, there's people just drive to beaches in the middle of nowhere at 10 at night.
Yeah, there's all sorts of, like, I mean, Banner, Ross Bay, like, midnight, 1, 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they're probably looking at my car going, who's that? What's that car doing there?
Yeah.
You know, like, it is a thing. And I realised with Banner, a lot of it was like young people like cruising.
Yeah.
Like, they're just like, you know, out just driving around for something to do, you know. Again, you sort of get it into your... Yeah, you can sort of get it into your head a little bit of like, oh, there's a car, what's this person doing? But they probably do that every night or every Friday night or every, you know, like, I'm the like me rocking up to camp, I'm the unknown.
Yeah.
You know, for local people who drive around there all the time, like, I'm the unknown quantity coming in, you know, like, it's not but again, it's the stories that you tell yourself.
Yeah, and like in terms of personal safety fears, I've said this to you before, but like, I'm not mostly, because I'm a man, so one of my privileges, I'm mostly not going to be worried about that unless maybe it's a large gang of very drunk late teens, early 20s guys.
Yeah.
That would make me a bit nervous. But the one thing I am very self-aware of is me being perceived as a threat by mostly, you know, women on their own walking dogs or doing the swimming, and I'm ruining the spot for them. So like, that is something I'm kind of going... So my method of dealing with it is to do a friendly wave and then to just not be looking at them at all, basically, because I figure that's about the...
Do you remember I think it was last year in Derrynane, there was a woman on a bike on her own.
Yes.
I think we had taken her spot, so she was a bit like, oh, I have to carry my bike up this dune now. We were a bit closer to the car park. But I mean, it's... I guess there's like, I think you learn yourself what kind of a spot you're looking for.
Yeah.
And what are those what are the things you're looking out for aside from the like practical things of like a flat piece of land. Like, I know for some people would talk, you know, again, depending on where you're camping, you want to be near a water source, you want to, you know, all of those things, but that's a step beyond where I am with, you know, with wild camping. But I think you do figure out your own internal list, and you get good at spotting places. And again, you'd be like, oh, I could camp there, but then I have to carry all my stuff down, because a lot of the Irish coastline is like the beach is down.
Yeah.
So, you know, you park up here and then you have to carry all your stuff down, depending on whether or not you're willing to do that.
Yeah.
Or again, if it's your only choice, you maybe go along with that. But
the biker's wheelbarrow comes in useful in most of those situations, and that if you can get a bike down there, then it's carrying the stuff for you. I've been in a couple of places where, because you can never tell really from a satellite image if it's going to be like that.
Exactly.
But you get there and you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to have to unload everything and carry it down.
Because like I've never actually camped on it, but I've been there during the day, like Inch Beach in Kerry, which is kind of renowned because people park on the beach and then get stuck. Or get caught with the tide or whatever. But that they do seem to be quite strict on not wanting people to camp.
Yeah, that's one of the places that does get... They do find people, I think, there, actually.
Okay,
it's one of the places I have. Now, I suspect mostly around the bank holidays. But
yeah, and this is the other thing, because that one time we got moved on was a bank holiday. So, you know, if you're kind of... You know, on a Thursday in early June.
Yeah. I mean, I do a lot of my cycle touring in May and June. Take advantage of the long daylight hours. And because, you know, and there's nobody doing any enforcement on things, you know. Like you're some beach that's 20 kilometres from the nearest guard station. You sort of imagine somebody ringing them up and they're going, well, we're not going all the way down there.
Yeah. And do you remember that guy who... I think it was Wine Strand, and he came over and started chatting to us. And again, my initial thing was, oh God, he's going to have issue with this now. But he was pointing out damage from a campfire that somebody had lit not correctly. And talking about what they were doing to kind of regenerate the earth. And then he was like, but you two seem okay. Because it was really warm, so we were like, oh, we're not going to light any fires or whatever. But he again, he was, you know, and I think with any tourism, even in your own country, you kind of have to remind yourself, from like, well, that's his, like, he comes there every day to walk his dog, presumably. So it's understandable for someone to be a little bit protective or defensive around their place. You know, so I think, again, if you're kind of friendly and chatty and show, you know, like, oh God, yeah, such a lovely spot, like, you know, I've been here before, it's really beautiful, or whatever, like, that kind of, I think, puts people, they're kind of like, all right, you're not going to do anything too off the wall here, you know. I know there was an issue during COVID around some spots in Wicklow of people coming and having massive parties and burning like tent poles. Or
festival
plastic, and then like just leaving stuff. And again, you're like, that's not great. You know, it's just not. And it is down to the people who live there then to come and clean up other people's mess, which isn't okay. But anyone who is in any way into camping just wouldn't do that.
You know? I mean, if I arrive somewhere and there's stuff left behind, I'd always try and take some of it with me. You know, because I figure that kind of is paying it. Is that paying it forward? I don't know what you'd call it.
But it's just being like, you're not going to leave it there. It's like, you know, it's not nature's fault that those people, you know, people didn't clear up after themselves. But I think for the most part, because this is what you always read about, say, with the likes of Hookhead, where people are like, people are leaving rubbish, and people are doing this, and people are doing that. And it's like, okay, there are always a very small number of people who will do that, but most people won't. And again, I'm not saying there should have been bins in the middle of the woods in wherever it was, not Glencree. Where was the issue in Wicklow?
Oh, Glenmalure.
Thank you. You know, because it is in the middle of a forest, so you're not gonna have bins up there. But you know, I think if generally speaking, if you make it easy and convenient for people, they will avail of those services. You know, I think most people, 95% of people, will do the decent thing. You know, use the bins or whatever. And not trash the toilets, because they'll be like, oh, brilliant, there's actually a toilet I can use at 8 a.m, you know. So
so if you're talking to somebody who was perhaps setting out and planning to do a cycle tour, is a bit nervous about wild camping, what would you tell them?
I guess just to do it.
I mean,
maybe ease yourself into it. So like for your first night, if you can, again, I'm not a cyclist, I'm not familiar with plotting out those kind of routes, maybe for your first night, know where you're going. So like have a spot where somebody has already camped before, so it kind of comes recommended, and it's maybe nearish to a town or a village or something, or some houses or whatever. Something that'll make you feel a bit more, get over any jitters you might have about it. And then probably plan for maybe after 3 nights for a campsite or a hostel or a B&B or something, to just give yourself that chance to well, also, I mean, let's face it, it's Ireland, you'll probably have been rained on a bit. So, you know, that you can have a shower, recharge all your stuff. That's another thing, a fully charged battery pack is a big knowing that you always have your phone fully charged is a big reassurance. And then kind of build yourself up to if there's a more remote stretch or whatever, maybe kind of build yourself up to that. And then stay in contact with people along the way. Have like, it was this really bizarre thing of being like, well, what's like Andrew going to do if you know, like, I'm down in Kerry, but like it just made me feel better. Like, you know, I share my location with maybe 3 friends, and then message 3 of them first thing in the morning, being like, I survived, ha ha ha, you know, how hilarious. But you know, and now I don't particularly feel the need to do that in the same way. But again, it's kind of finding what works for you. I think building yourself up. And also, if you get to a couple of nights and you're like, you know what, I'm not sure this is really for me, or I'm not enjoying it as much, give yourself a break and stay in campsites for a couple of nights, and then, you know, that would be my...
I mean, with the whole cycle touring thing, my whole thing with it is you're allowed chicken out of stuff.
Totally.
Completely. That's because, like, I'm like, when I went to Scotland, I was quite apprehensive about doing a month on my own.
Yeah, of course.
No accommodation booked.
Yeah.
I had my first ferry crossing booked. That was absolutely, I didn't even know where I was going for each of the things.
Yeah.
So, like, the way I get myself to do it is just to say, you can set out and you can give up and give your bike away randomly to somebody and get the next bus home or whatever. You know, that's completely down. You won't, and of course you won't actually do that. But certainly with the wild camping, you know, if it doesn't suit you, then just get a B&B. And the thing is, like, I think that first long trip I did in Kerry, that was what I did. I had my third night. My second night, I just freaked out. Not really clear why. I think I just cycled too much and I was exhausted and I was probably hungry. And I just so it wasn't that I had any particular fear, but I just... Oh, that's what I needed. Oh, that's what I needed. Became overcome by
overwhelmed,
by the whole thing. So I just booked into a B&B in Kenmare that night. So I just had to cycle back up, you know, following my route around Kenmare, and that was grand.
Yeah.
So I think I like with cycle touring in general, because there's an expression I came across which was not to pack your fears. Now, what's that actually used about is you're going, oh, what do I need to bring? Well, what if I need all the tools. You could fix any problem whatsoever on a bike. And if you're cycling across Africa, actually might actually need that.
Yeah.
But if you're going around Ireland, you don't. You know, all you need is enough money to pay for a taxi to the nearest place there's a bike shop.
Absolutely. And I think it's also, like, people are good, right? You know, for the most part, people are good and kind, and they'll help you out.
Yes,
you know? And I think what's, again, nice bit about camping and wild camping is you do get chatting to people, even if it's just a casual, like, oh, hey, have you camped here before or whatever. Like, you do kind of have nice, very human kind of exchanges with people that are just remind you that people would help you out, you know. And when I was camping in the place at the foot of Carrantoul, Cronin's Yard, which again is an example of, like, I think it's a tenner to camp. It certainly was at the time. And that gets you your spot. Yeah,
I mean, that place is set up for people to hike up Carrantoul from.
Exactly.
So I think like the reason there's quite a lot of reasonable places in Scotland is
it's for hikers.
That's the set. Yeah, it's for hikers.
But there was a few people, a few cyclists camping there because again they knew, like, well, that's a place where I can definitely get to. I'll definitely get a spot. It's only a tenner, and then they, they're not going hiking. But
it's not that
you know,
far from Killarney, so
Yeah.
anywhere for a tenner near Killarney
and
is
that's
like...
and that's why, like, cause one night I was there, a cyclist arrived from Killarney, and he'd got off the train and discovered he had a puncture.
Oh, right.
Went and got it fixed in Killarney, but that obviously shaved 3 hours or whatever off his schedule. So he was like, "Oh, I'll just cycle to Cronan's Yard," and yeah, I remember being fascinated watching him unpacking, and everything was like, you know, down, whereas I had my enormous, you know, amount of stuff in the car. But you know, yeah, that's an example. It would be great to see more of those kind of campsites.
Yeah.
I think, or an equivalent to that where you pay a tenner and it's pretty basic, and the understanding is that you're gone. It's generally one night stays, and that you're kind of gone by 8 or 9 in the morning, and that's you know, I think that's been there for decades. I think that's probably always been something.
Yes,
You know?
yeah.
And it also serves the purpose of that's where people meet when
Yeah.
they're going up Carrauntoohil.
Yeah.
So it's got multiple purposes.
People
but,
probably leave messages saying, if I don't come back in 3 days...
Well, I mean, that's the other thing.
There's
It's like
Glenbrittle, actually, campsite on Skye, which is way down in the middle of nowhere. Like it's down past the ferry pool. It's another 10 kilometres
Okay,
down,
yeah,
which
yeah.
is that in itself is nowhere, and it's between the Cullens, black and the red Cullen. But although you get people in camper vans and things visiting it, it's also the base by which an awful lot of people climb from. And so it literally is the spot where people, you know, leave a note in the coffee shop saying, yeah, I should be back by 8 o'clock this
But
evening.
that's really important,
Yes,
though.
yeah,
And again,
yeah,
that's probably
yeah,
been
yeah.
the way for.
And this is my intended route. Yeah.
That's probably been the way for donkey's years, because
Yeah.
again, you don't want to be relying on technology for that kind of hiking, because you can't guarantee you'll have any coverage.
Oh, particularly
or
there,
whatever.
because there's I think there's an awful lot of iron in the mountains, so magnetic direction and things is all screwed.
wow,
So
okay.
no phone signal down that bottom of the valley either.
Oh, I didn't
so-
know that. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's and it's the kind of thing, once you've done a bit of it, you'll know if you enjoy it or not, and then it'll get easier and more familiar each time. And like this, like Ireland is so beautiful, and there are so many beautiful spots, and that's not thinking about, you know, wild camping in Scotland or in France or in Spain or anywhere where you can have all these really really amazing spots, and you might be the only person there, and that's really cool to wake up and be the only person on a beach or at the foot of a mountain or something. Like that's a really cool thing. So yeah, it's definitely worth doing.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that helped me when I was starting with camping was like investing a little bit in some gear. Again, it's different when you're in a car. So like my stove is big. It's a touring
It would
stove.
fill an
It's not
entire
a touring
pannier,
stove.
basically.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly. But you know, it was cheap, and I was like, right, for the amount of times I'm going to use it, like it'll get me started, you know. But like having, you know, like good head torch, comfortable ground mat or mattress, and good sleeping bag. Like buying a decent sleeping bag was my game changer with camping, because when you're cold, nothing is fun. So like having a decent sleeping bag and a chair, something you can sit on, you know, and look at the sunset, or have your morning coffee or whatever it is I think just makes a big difference. And like I really enjoy that when I arrive somewhere and set up and like make a cup of tea or a coffee or whatever on the stove, and then sit and have a beer and look at the world go by or whatever. Like that's one of the things I really enjoy about camping.
I'll stick in a contrast picture actually here, which is you cooking with your setup, and then I had my
Your little
when
fuel
I was on
stove.
Colonside, where I didn't even have that. I basically have some wraps, a bottle of wine, and a jar of hollandaise sauce, I think, and then some prosecco. Not prosecco, the meat slices, those Italian meat slices.
prosciutto. I was like, geez, prosecco.
Yeah.
No, totally. I mean, and that's the thing. You can, when you're in a car,
Yeah.
you know, I'd have my cool bag with food and my stove and all the rest of it. Like it is different.
Yeah.
But I kind of, again, I'm like, well, I have everything I need for the next 24 hours. So
Yes.
if the shops are closed or I can't find a pub that's open or whatever,
Yeah.
you know, I'm fine. But I guess you do still have to consider water and having enough water and all the rest of it. But I think having having comfortable gear that is like a tent that's easy to put up, and that is going to keep the rain out.
Yeah.
Important. And just like having, because again, you can do that when you're in a car.
Yeah.
And you can throw in, if you want to bring a double duvet, bring a double duvet.
Yeah.
Like, you can do all of that in a car.
Well, my big game changer this year was that was the sleeping mat. Like last year, the previous year, I bought a very lightweight German thing that was cheap. But the problem was after you'd used it 8 or 9 times, it just self-deflated over the night.
Okay.
So it'd be fine initially, and then at 4 o'clock in the morning, you'd wake up and your back would be sore.
Yeah.
And then, this year, because I tend to buy myself one piece of nice kit a year, if you do that over a decade, then all your kit is pretty nice.
Yeah.
And it doesn't hurt quite as much. So I bought the Xterm Neo Air Light or whatever, which is very 200 plus quid basically, sleeping mat. But whereas the previous year I basically had to do a B&B about every third or fortnight just to catch up on sleep because I just wasn't sleeping properly.
Yeah.
Whereas this year I did up to 8 or 9 nights in a row on it.
Yeah.
So actually, saved myself the money instantly, more or less.
Yeah, and I
So-
mean, the first few times I went camping, I was in my 20s, so like I didn't grow up camping.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah,
like it wasn't
yeah.
a thing we did as a family, and I think it was probably in South Africa, and we were sleeping on those tiny little ground mats.
Yes.
Camped a couple of nights on no ground mat, just lying on the
Yeah.
ground, and like it's uncomfortable and it's cold a lot of the time because sleeping on the ground it's cold sleeping on the ground, And I think a lot of people who I talk to who are like, oh no, I hate camping, and it's because they had like went to a festival where it rained and their tent leaked, or they were made go camping as kids and didn't like it, or it's like when people hate horse riding, it's usually because a horse ran off at them at some point, like, whereas if you kind of go, well, and I remember going camping sitting on like a black plastic sack as my seat.
Yes.
And again on the little tiny ground mat, and I'm being like, why is my back sore and why are my hips sore? But just finding those things and investing, like you say, a little bit over time, and when you break down how much use you get out of it, it just makes a big difference, and having like having the basic cooking equipment. Again, I'm not advocating everyone should buy the big stove, 'cause it does
This
take-
is a cycling audience for
yes,
talking
it
about.
does take up a lot of space. It does take up a lot of
You
space.
definitely want a trailer.
It does take up a lot of space. It's not practical, but it's practical for my purposes.
Yes.
It's not one of those little magic Primus things that folds up to nothing.
Yes, I'll insert a link to my tiny alcohol stove here. You can see that in action.
So and that just made, again, being able to be spontaneous, being able to be a bit more not depending on there being a pub nearby where you could eat. It's nice if there is a pub as an option or whatever. But it did kind of make a difference. And again, being able to get up in the morning and make my coffee, and sit and look at the sunrise or the happy dogs running on the beach, whatever it is one of my favourite bits of camping.
Yeah. That and either the kind of late evening swim or the early morning one. It's pretty good too.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I mean that was in the camping I did in 2021. That was the routine. Set up the tent, go for a swim, come back and cook dinner.
Guest appearance from Wilma.
Guest appearance. Wilma went camping for the first time this year. She was very good. She didn't know what it was, but she had some fun. And then same in the morning, get up, go for a swim, come back, make your coffee. Like, it's nice. That is the beauty of camping in Ireland, that there are all these amazing spots where you can get up and have a swim or walk on the beach or or whatever it is that you like doing. It is all right there in your doorstep again in a way that you don't have in a campsite. Maybe there are campsites that are like that. I would be keen to hear recommendations if anyone's been like, there is this really scenic campsite. That you kind of get that full experience of being a bit more immersed in nature with that kind of camping. So yeah.
I hope you found that wild camping interview useful. I think there's a lot in it. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up so it gets out to more people. I'm also going to be doing more videos on wild camping, particularly one on advocacy on the channel. So do give the channel a follow if you might be interested in that sort of stuff. And of course, if you're into e-bike touring, give me a follow in particular because that's what most of my content is.